Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Backstage Bimbo TV. My name is Allison Rouse, your most notorious groupie, and author of We've Got Tonight, The Life and Times of Notorious Groupie, me. So great to see everybody again. Welcome back, and for all the new people, awesome to meet you. I'm so glad you've discovered me and are having fun with me. I can never be thankful enough for all the love and support. So, and this week on our Rocky Talkie, we are going to talk about what it was like to live in Seattle in the 90s at the height of grunge. Because it was pretty cool. And I hope I can convey in this Rocky Talkie really, truly what it was like to live there, to be among grunge at its height. It was amazing. And we're just going to have a Melvin's beer. I consider them local, even though they're kind of across the border in Wyoming. These guys are awesome. They are the kings of the dank. They rock. Love them. So everybody, grab your Melvins. And if you don't know why I'm doing Melvins for for this midweek Rocky Talkie on Seattle, then you are not a grunge lover. You don't know anything about the Seattle scene because we all love the Melvins. One of the greatest punk rock bands to come out of Sub Pop. Hells yeah. Alright, everybody. Grab your Melvins, kick up your feet, and let's have a little Rocky Talkie, shall we? Cheers, big ears. Oh, here I go with too much head again. Love these guys. This is one of their hazies. Absolutely love it. Anyway, so the first time I lived in Seattle, I'm actually going to talk really more about the second time in the 90s. The first time I moved up around 1990, grunge was just happening. It was burgeoning. It was still kind of the verge of the glam scene. Thrash was not as big and it was still emerging. Metallica was huge. There were all these big bands. But when I lived up there the first time, like I said, everybody was just getting signed. Mother Love Bone was breaking up. Pearl Jam hadn't happened yet. And it was really cool to see that aspect of it. To really see, kind of how grunge and all that came up out of this dark, dingy club scene in Seattle. Because I think of all the clubs in Seattle, and that's what I always think of: the dark, the dingy, like Rock Candy or Off Ramp or down in Tacoma where they did some shows. God, what's the name? It's in my book. Legends. Just all these other, and then the practice pads and stuff. And the first time it was kind of more dark, but the second time I lived up there in 94 to 95, it was really, really a happy happening scene, even though heroin was still involved. I worked at the downtown Deja Vu strip club right across from the Clock on the Pike Street Market. And I talk sometimes about this Italian restaurant called Bistro. And a couple blocks up was the Brick Street where the first night I met Vinnie Paul. I talk about the Brick. Salt Lake City has a Brick Street, or used to, so I say Brick Street a lot. But anyway, it was called the Brick. So I was kind of sandwiched, and plus the band's hotel was, usually Four Seasons, which was just, 4 more blocks up another way from my strip club. So my strip club, I was fortunately located centrally for the downtown Seattle scene. Like I said, the bistro, you could wander in the bistro and see the guys from Queensryche, or, Sean Kinney from Alice in Chains, or, a couple of the guys from Green Apple Quick Step and Screaming Trees, because it was just this kind of little bistro. Or, like I said, Brick was a really great place. People were just wandering around. It wasn't like LA and everybody had their fancy cars and their shades and their attitudes. They knew they were rock stars. They knew that they were big, but they were still in flannel. They were still walking around downtown that they knew and loved and grew up in and became rock stars in. It wasn't like they just moved to LA like they did later, because they did. And the rock stars had not moved to LA yet. I mean, this was a time the Green River Killer was still around. He wasn't arrested yet. Pioneer Square was not this big, expensive tech place. It didn't become this place yet. Like John Corbin, who played Aiden on Sex and the City, he was from there, and he owned a couple clubs down in Pioneer Square, where there was tons of different music clubs that you paid $20 to get into all of them. So you could hear grunge, you could hear some, blues, you could hear some country, you could hear some butt rock all in one night. And there was still this kind of very awesome community among the musicians and Sub Pop and people and life going on in Seattle, because it was still so normal. And like I said, it wasn't LA. And the green, and there was still an innocence. This is before cell phones and Sex in the City and purses being outrageously expensive. Like, I have an Hermes because I found it for $50 in Seattle at some secondhand shop by the Moore Theater, which the Moore Theater was huge, and they had this little hotel next to it. I mean, this is a time you could go to the Moore Theater, bang on the Backstage door, and be like, "Hi, we want to meet the band." And they'd be like, "Come on in, ladies." And we would come on in. It's how we met Collective Soul. Heaven let your light shine down. Yeah. That song. They were funny. They were so innocent. Me and Jana didn't know what to do with them. But that was the thing. People were still innocent in Seattle. There was not this, like, grunge was really happening. Nirvana was huge. But like I said, Seattle was more like being at home. I lived in West Seattle, which is across the sound from the Pike Street Market. I had a view of the whole city in the Edgewater Hotel where the Led Zeppelin thing happened. From there on down, Queen Anne on down, past downtown and stuff. I had this amazing view from where I lived in West Seattle. But at the time, I had neighbors. Around the block was Eddie Vedder. Around the other way was Susan Silver, who was Soundgarden's manager, and her husband at the time, Chris Cornell. And like I said, it was a very different community. You could wander into the Brick Street, see these guys just sort of playing, kind of just hanging out, go to industry parties. Heart is from there, and their recording studio probably is still the biggest used recording studio up there. And you could be like in the studio with Alice in Chains, like I said, with Vinnie Paul. And everybody was mixing, and it was all eclectic, and nobody was like standoffish and protective yet, because you didn't need to be. There was, like I said, a freedom to being yourself, whether you were a musician or not, or just being part of the Seattle scene. There was a camaraderie and a understanding, because like I said, there wasn't like this extra protectiveness that today's social media brings to musicians or actors or influencers, whatever the fuck those are supposed to be. So the attitudes, the relaxed attitudes was very prevalent at the time. Like I said, walking home from Vinnie Paul's, I run into Jerry Cantrell and their manager. I could easily go to this place for really killer crab legs at the Pike Street Market and see a couple guys from My Sister's Machine, or go to somebody's house party and run into Owen, who I had known before I moved up to Seattle. And I mean, everybody even had the same drug dealer. Like, I didn't do heroin, but my weed dealer was introduced to me by a couple of guys from Green Apple Quick Step. So it was just really awesome, because like I said, you could just walk down the street. Hey. Oh, look. There's Jeff Ahmet. How you doing, Jeff? Cool. You going to Tool tomorrow? Me too. I'll see you at the Moore Theater. Want to grab a coffee? Yeah, I'll go grab a coffee with you. But I wanted to hit this one vintage shop down by the Pike. And that's kind of how it was. All right. And I'm not saying that ever happened with Jeff Ahmet. That's just a name I pulled out of my head. That happened with a couple people in the music scene. Just happened to run into him, And like I said, it was so much more innocent. It was kind of the end of an era, but it was the beginning of a new one. And not just rock and roll, but in my life as well. Which was really cool because, I'm in my early 20s. I'm discovering myself alone for the first time without my family, without Danny, without Kristen, without everybody. Just, me being on this stupid little scene. And meeting Andrea and Jana and even creating my own style because Seattle opened up a whole new door of style. Believe it or not, it wasn't just flannels and Doc Martens. The women had a whole different kind of grungy style that, yeah, did include flannel and Doc Martens, but really cool stuff. Like one of the strippers I worked with, Bianca, she was a fashion design student at the Art Institute, and there's a picture I have of me coming into the dressing room in Seattle with this hot pink leopard print jacket that she actually designed for me and made for me that I loved. Gave to my nephew because he rocked it better than I did these days. But that's kind of what Seattle was like. It's like the music was. How do I describe this? The music was just kind of always the center of of Seattle and its emotions at the time. It's long gone because now it's all tech, 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 tech. And a lot of musicians, they may have houses up there, but even Jerry Cantrell moved down to LA. Mike Inez, everybody kind of lives elsewhere now than Seattle. Although some people are moving back up there because, I don't know, same reason all those people from LA are moving to Salt Lake City. And it's the wrong ones. Trumponian fucktards. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, I don't mean to piss off my people, but I'm not into conspiracy and bullshit. So, and a lot of that exodus is happening from LA to Salt Lake City right now, and it's really just driving this economy into the ground like no tomorrow. So, no offense to anybody, and I don't mean to put that rant in the middle of my Seattle, because this is Seattle 94, 95. Grunge is huge. And like I said, every band that I went backstage to at the time in Seattle, it was like a who's of grunge back there. Like I was going backstage to Soundgarden because I knew them and I knew a couple people, Grunge and Gunk and Gungy, working for them. And a couple of the Seattle security guard ladies were being bitches and, no, we're not going to let you back there. I'm like, Gunk is right there. He's telling me it's okay to come back. So what happened? Reverend Horton Heat was pulling their tour bus and they're like, hey ladies, you having a problem? We're like, yeah, I know Gunk and Gungy. And they're like, oh yeah, cool. Jump on the bus. So we jump on the bus. Fuck you, yellow jacket bitch security guards trying to keep us from the band. But that's still kind of how it was. Rock and roll was prevalent in Seattle. And it was really awesome. There was still that camaraderie that had originally been Sub Pop, and there's a couple documentaries about Sub Pop that you should watch. One that I recently watched. It was really awesome. And it just really brought back, like, you watch the movie Singles. And it's kind of the almost famous of grunge era in Seattle. Like that Hollywood twinkly, Cameron Crowe, soft, emotional bullshit kind of movie. It really just kind of showcased all the music, really, and some of the other rockers. But the one true thing that was absolutely hilarious about that movie was when the Matt What's His Butt is in. He's like, we're number one in Belgium. Oh my God. I heard that so many times in Seattle during that era from the up and coming bands. From the first time I was in Seattle to the last time I lived in Seattle. It was hilarious because every time you heard that, you're just like, oh, sure you are. Maybe Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Alice in Chains, they could say that, but really, it was kind of the cop-out to, we're not as great as I thought we were going to do, but hey, there's still hope type of thing. But that was still Seattle. Like I said, it wasn't completely heroin-soaked yet and dark and dirty. It's like the day Kurt Cobain killed himself and then Courtney Love started with the big brouhaha publicly and, reading the letter while there was a huge mass gathering down at the Space Needle, which is where there was a lot of bands that played there. It was big arenas, indoor and outdoor, right there by the Space Needle. So that kind of, for me, it's like, it was such a freedom. And spring and spirit time. Like, I could almost walk around barefoot downtown Seattle. Of course, you didn't, but even the Mexican gang members who hung out on the corner that dealt me my weed were really cool. Like, there was still a camaraderie and an honor, and do unto others as you would have done to yourself, and don't fuck with anybody who's not fucking with you. That is kind of prevalent in today's society, especially the Western cultures where we do have so much access and freedom that we take it for granted, like I talked about on last week's The Power of vajayjays. The more freedom that comes with social circles, the more we tend to abuse it towards other people. But it really was a time of just kick back. Everybody, was still smoking weed and kicking back at Gaswork Park or, Bycracky Park in Queen Anne. And like I said, you could go to the Brick Street and see everybody jamming on these little acoustic stuff. You didn't, like I said, you didn't have to have walls up or to be afraid or to be broken or to be soaked in heroin or anything. We were all still so young and free. And I was so lucky to be part of Seattle at that time, because even though grunge was still a worldwide thing, at home it was still very family oriented and very kick back and cool. And hey, we're in Seattle, we don't need to be all la la land, which was awesome. So, and I got to see Soundgarden a lot. I got to see Alice in Chains at shows and at the Brick, and Queens, running into the guys in Queensryche down at the bistro. They were kind of there more often than anybody else. And, even making friends with Andrea and even Jana was a lesson at that time and part of my freedom and part of my journey, which was awesome. And this was part of rock and roll's journey into a whole different attitude and era of rock and roll that kind of killed the groupie, but it really didn't, because what they were saying outwardly about groupies and what they were doing behind the scenes, two totally different things. So, right, Eddie Vedder? Mm-hmm. This is so true. But that's kind of lost today, especially in the grunge guys. They've just kind of all moved to LA or wherever, and they've kind of gone off their own little ways, and every band still has what I call De Fuhrer, that is the controlling element in the band and stuff, and it's all so much more protective because, like I said, the freedom of the internet has allowed people to invade lives like they couldn't before, and that's part of why Seattle was so cool at the time, because they still had a certain privacy and could comfortably just kick back and not put on their rock star to go out and have a couple drinks with the boys or go have breakfast at the Nightlight Cafe next to the Moore Theater. They had such a great breakfast. I loved them. And like I said, this little dive cafe, you could see who's who of rock and roll hanging. Whoops. Sorry, I keep water over there. I spilled. But so that's kind of what Seattle was like. It was a whole different freedom. Not just for me, but for the musicians too, that were some of the biggest musicians in the world, but at home in Seattle were just the men they were off stage. And the music really was so centered to everything that was going on in the city at the time. Like, it was proud of its identity. And now it, like I said, the day Kurt Cobain and all that and was going down, and Courtney Love, that kind of switched Seattle to the darker, that kind of didn't want to be associated with the redheaded stepchild type of thing anymore and needed to refresh itself. And then the musicians started moving away because record companies and whatever. So some of them still have houses there, but they don't spend their full time there. And the grunge musicians I knew, these were their only houses, were in Seattle at the time. So like I said, it was a much more simple and easy time that I missed so much. And sorry, you guys, I have to stop every so often because my allergies are so bad. The air in this town is so hideous. It's like literally this thick of smudge just to even get out the door. So I'm sorry if my voice or my sinuses, I'm just so embarrassed. I'm so sorry, you guys. But subscribe. So yeah, that was Seattle at the time. It was just more kicked back and more relaxed, and you could be the grunge rock star without being living in LA type of thing. And you still had your favorite haunts, and you still went to the off ramp or to the Blue Note or Pioneer Square or Brick, and everybody just sort of cool, and it was kind of the dirty hippie of the 90s, I guess. Because the dirty hippies of the 60s and 70s, they had problems with heroin too, ask Jimmy Page. And a few others, but yeah. So there you guys go. It was such a wonderful time to live in Seattle because you got to be around the music while it was being made. The city, like I said, its whole vibe just came from the music. And kind of was so proud of its identity back then, and everybody was just so kicked back and free, and you could just mix and mingle in some of the weirdest places and industry parties, and go to Band Animal's studio and watch Alice in Chains record their last album. Unfortunately, Seattle is long gone. Like I said, it's all tech, 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 and overpriced, overpriced, overpriced. Pioneer Square is still there, but the apartments that were $500 one bedrooms and $350 studios are now $3,000 one bedrooms and $2,000 studios. It's ridiculous. Like that arty vibe in Seattle, gone. Even their best, like little restaurants, and they had some really awesome vintage stores that I did a lot of shopping at. Like I said, I bought an Hermes that's worth tens of thousands for $50. So, can't do that anymore because, well, Hollywood and the internet. It takes things and twists it all around. But fortunately, when I lived there, it was just starting to twist into the good areas. So, there you guys go. There's my midweek Rocky Talkie, or as I like to call it, my babble, about what Seattle was really like during the grunge years. Like, to be knee deep in Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Nirvana. I mean, the only guy I really didn't see that much around the city was Kurt Cobain. Saw Courtney right after because Nine Inch Nails was playing the Moore Theater. I was stuck in a car and her Barney, and oh god, that was a nightmare. I was just like, can I get out? Can I just... The car wasn't moving. Like, I wanted to dive through the glass just to get out. The doors were locked and I couldn't... Yeah, anyway. But, shit like that could happen back then because that was Seattle. Everybody knew everybody. It was still kind of small town rock and roll. God, and I miss that. Because now it's like everybody needs to be associated to somebody. And I know I make a living off what I do, but my life kind of didn't have a choice. So, but yeah, that's when everybody knew everybody in Seattle. Everybody was associated with the rock and roll. It was a very vibrant and pumping city, You could hear Jimi Hendrix, just his riffs floating off the water coming from Bremerton. So, all right, guys. Thanks again for listening to my babble this week. I appreciate you guys so much. Great to meet everybody and all the new people. I love you guys so much. And you hater fans, you may hate me, but you're still a fan. Because you're following me still. So appreciate you motherfuckers too. All right. Hit the like button. Hit my bells. Hit the subscribe. Hit the share. Spread me like I spread my legs in the 80s. Cheers, big ears. Drink your Melvins.